AngelSpeakers, interpretado en Español. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Enlightened World Network, to AngelSpeakers, interpreted in Spanish. Buenos días, buenas tardes y buenas noches, donde quiera que estén. El día de hoy le damos la bienvenida a Risa Ware. Ella es una trabajadora en un programa de apoyo para niños, adolescentes y familias en YOLO Hospice, en el hospicio YOLO. Today we have with us, I am excited to have Risa Ware from YOLO Hospice, and she's going to talk to us about the Stepping Stones program, which is a program that supports children, teens, and families. And she works at YOLO Hospice in Davis, California. So welcome, Risa.
Bienvenida.
Bienvenida a nuestro programa. I just want to say something that I forgot to mention. Terry Angel, which is the host of the program, she is driving to Arizona today. Terry Angel está manejando a Arizona el día de hoy en nuestra jornada de sanación, el Tour de la Paz en la Tierra. Terry Angel is driving to Arizona today in the Peace on Earth Tour, Our Journey of Healing. Okay, so I would like to give the space to Risa. Is that the way to say your name?
It's actually Ressa.
Oh, Ressa.
Yes, Ressa.
You know that in Spanish, Reza means, well, there is a word called Reza, and it means pray.
Yes, someone has told me that before.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, that's wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's usually interpreted as Risa, and but yes, it is actually Ressa, as if it had two S's.
Oh, okay. Okay, good to know. I'm glad I asked you because I wasn't sure. I haven't heard that name before.
That's okay. Thank you for asking.
Yes. And I am looking forward to hear what you want to share with us, because at this time, as we know, there are so many losses, and I feel it's very relevant to have you here at this time, because there is so much that I'm sure you are going to be able to share with us today. El día de hoy le digo a Reza que estamos en un tiempo donde hay muchas pérdidas, y que tenerla en el programa el día de hoy es muy significativo para muchas familias que lo necesitan. Entonces, I am going to leave the space for Reza to share with us. Le voy a dejar el espacio a Reza para que nos comparta acerca de este hermoso programa. Gracias, Reza.
Well, thank you for having me on today. Yes, so as Lily said, I'm Ressa. I am a bereavement specialist here at YOLO Hospice, which, just a fun fact, YOLO Hospice is actually the oldest not-for-profit hospice in the Sacramento Valley area. We've been around for 40 years, so that's always kind of a fun thing to share. We serve 5 counties: YOLO County, Solano, Sacramento, Colusa, and Sutter. And what I do specifically through YOLO Hospice is I am the coordinator of a program called Stepping Stones, and we are a bereavement support program for children and teens ages 4 to 17. So I'll tell you a little bit more about our program here in a few minutes. but just wanted to start with a statistic through the Childhood Bereavement Estimation Model. This is a national statistic of 2020. And it really is something that has a big impact on the work that we do and why we do the work. It's 1 in 14 children in the US will experience the death of a parent or a sibling by the age of 18, which is just huge. And that's such a big number to think about all of these children in our world that are going through loss and experiencing bereavement. The really interesting thing about this model, this childhood bereavement estimation model, is that they actually break it down state by state. So I pulled the number for California because that's where we are right now. So 1 in 18 children in California will experience the death of a parent or a sibling by age 18. So I don't know, that just really it really hits home to help us to realize why we need the support for our kids, for families in general, but especially for children going through this experience of grief. So I also wanted to just start with what a child's understanding of death is, because it's kind of a hard conversation to have with kids, and talking about death and bereavement and grief, it's all really tough, and especially when it's a close family member, and we as adults or parents or guardians, anybody, we're grieving too. So to have to help a child through that grief process, it can be sometimes difficult and more strained. But there's 3 important things to think about. So what does the child want to know? What does the child need to know? And what can the child understand? So starting with what does a child want to know? In general, children are going to ask questions. We know that that's how they are. But when it comes to talking about that a death has happened, it's best to use clear words, give honest, brief answers, and generally it's better to begin the dialogue with some basic information and then let the child ask questions. Be specific and literal, and use factual information to explain what death means. So a really good example is when somebody dies, it means their body can no longer work. Their heart stops working and they don't breathe anymore. It's important to use clear language because kids get confused if you say someone passed away, or someone is no longer with us, or we lost someone. That's really confusing language because they can't understand what that means. To them, they think, oh, that person's lost, we'll just find them and it's okay. So using that clear language is very important. Briefly tell them where and how the death happened and what the cause of death was, but keep the responses at their level of understanding. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that would mean later, but yeah, keep it at a level of understanding that they can comprehend. The next question is, what does a child need to know? Number 1, they need to know that the loss, the death, is real, it's permanent, and it's irreversible. If a child is left uninformed, he or she may imagine or visualize things even worse than what the truth is. They also need to know that the loss is not their fault. Many young children blame themselves after a death. That's a very common thing that I hear. If only I wouldn't have made my mom so upset all the time, or if I wouldn't have made her walk the dog, or, that those sorts of things can really happen. They really feel that their own thoughts and behaviors may have brought on the death. And they need to know too that the death was not because the one who died wanted to leave him or her. It's it's they died and it's not their fault. That's the main thing that we need to convey to them. The child has others who love and will take care of him or her. Provide them with love. Try to provide them with the same routine as best as you can, emotional support, answer their questions, playtime, just daily care. Keeping some things the same is okay, and that's good for them. Sometimes we tend to want to pull them out of school or pull them out of their routine, and yeah, that's good for the first couple of days, but I think it's really important to get them back into a routine. It helps them to feel safe and to get back to a sense of normal, that a normal day. They need to know that a wide range of reactions is acceptable and normal. So feelings about death can be really strange and confusing. They feel really mixed up inside. Sometimes their bodies might feel numb. Even if the adults around you are showing a lot of feelings and you maybe aren't showing the same feelings, that's okay. So talking to them about like their common thoughts and physical reactions whenever somebody dies is a very good thing to do. And also let them know that you're grieving too and you're feeling the same thing. You know, it's important for them to know that adults are having these thoughts and these feelings too. And that people who are grieving the same loss often are going to feel very differently. So they might be experiencing grief completely differently than their mom or their dad or their grandma or their sister. Somebody who's grieving the same loss. We all experience it differently. Well, you're muted, Lily. I don't know if you know it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to let you know the people that are in the audience that are wanting to say hello. Hope is saying hello. Tony Costa from Portugal wants to say hello, and they are in the audience.
Hi.
And have my glasses on and see. Holistic. Yeah, it seems that the name is Holistic Concierge. So that they are watching as well. So we have a live audience in both platforms. Thank you for being here. I am really enjoying the conversation, Reza. I would like to briefly translate into Spanish what you mentioned, but I would like if you could please mention the most important things that, like, if you can mention the most important thing just now, so I can translate those ones into Spanish. You mentioned 3 points, 3 things. Could you please repeat those?
Yeah. When talking to a child about the death, the 3 important things to think about are what the child wants to know, what the child needs to know, and what the child can understand.
Reza nos está diciendo que cuando se le hable a un niño acerca de la muerte de un ser querido, que hay 3 cosas importantes por mencionar. Una es, ¿qué es lo que el niño quiere? Segunda, ¿qué es lo que el niño necesita? Needs. Y tercera, ¿qué es lo que el niño puede comprender? What is what can the child understand? Okay, Oresa, thank you.
And did you get the statistic? I think that's an important thing too, that 1 in 14 children in the US will experience the death of a parent or a sibling by age 18. I think that's a really important note too.
Oh, wow. También dice Reza que 1 en 14 niños en los Estados Unidos pierden you say they lose a parent?
They will experience the death of a parent or a sibling.
Or sibling. Sufren la pérdida de un padre o de un hermano a más tardar a los 18 años. Para los 18 años ya están en esta estadística. Wow.
Yes, from and I can even share the website that all of these numbers come from with you. It's an organization that is just really working on childhood bereavement research, and and in programs all around the United States are using their data to build their programs to what children need, specifically bereaved children.
Sure. So I will type those into the comments, and it will be important to have that for people that like to look more at the statistics and the data and the research and all of that.
Yeah, you can go on the website and they break it down state by state. So like I said, California is 1 in 18 children, but there are other states that it's like 1 in 7, 1 in 9. I mean, it varies across the United States. So it's kind of interesting to see that.
So do you see that California has one of the highest?
They actually have one of the lowest, but it depends on the county. From the model, parent death by the age of 18, Trinity County is the highest, and then there's a county, Mono County. I'm not super familiar with California yet, but Mono County has the lowest concentration. But it kind of varies. It looks like Northern California experiences higher, the children experience higher, the death rates are higher in Northern California, basically.
All right. Okay, Reza, thank you for sharing that. And please continue with your conversation. It's really interesting.
Yeah. The third important note on talking to children about death is, what can the child understand? So we know, if any of us have kids or children that we interact with in schools, or anyone in our lives, we know that each child is unique, and their understanding of death varies based on lots of different things. Just because someone is 7 years old, they might have a higher understanding of what grief and what death is than a 10-year-old. It just depends on their life experiences and things that they have gone through. There are specific, ages where we know developmentally things are happening, and we can kind of relate grief to each of the developmental stages. But it's important to consider these 6 things when it comes to recognizing what the child can understand. So the first one is their age. It depends on your developmental level. Whenever you're younger, you have that magical thinking of, anything's possible. We have that imagination. As kids start to get older, they realize that there are limits to our imagination and there are limits to what's real. So that their grief and their thoughts about death and loss change as they get older. Their personality, their maturity. As we know, some kids are more mature than others, and it depends on their life experience. Cognitive ability, their cultural context, what they've grown up in culturally, and then their present and their previous experience with loss. Unfortunately, there are so many kids today that have experienced several losses in their life, and then there's some that maybe when I'm meeting them, it's their first. So it depends on, every child is different. Everybody's grief is individual. Every child is individual. So we really have to look at it on a case by case basis. There's not a lot of generalizing that you can do when it comes to grief in childhood.
Okay, Reza, I am going to translate that portion. Thank you. Reza dice que la tercer cosa importante que es bueno saber cuando se le habla a un niño de la muerte es lo que el niño puede entender y ella dice que cada niño es único y como sabemos varía de acuerdo a cada niño y de sus experiencias personales. Depende de la etapa de desarrollo, depende, algunas cosas que son importantes de reconocer es la edad, the age, porque sabemos que los niños tienen esa etapa donde tienen ese pensamiento mágico, donde tienen mucha imaginación y a medida que crecen empiezan a tener como que más, empiezan a percibir mejor la imaginación y la realidad. También depende de su grado de madurez, también depende de su habilidad cognitiva y también depende de su entorno cultural y de pasadas experiencias. Gracias.
So these three things I just talked about were, you know, kind of how are we starting that conversation with children about death, and how are we allowing them to experience it. So the next part I want to talk about is what you can do when a child is grieving. And the most important thing that I have found is really individualizing a plan for each family and child, and even each child within the family, because you could have one sibling, or you could have three children in the family and they each are experiencing grief in their own separate, very individual ways. So you can't make a plan to help a child based on, you know, just an overview of the family. You kind of need to know each individual child. So unlike adults, children process their grief over and over again through each developmental stage. So adults experience grief the same. It's individual. There are many things throughout life that it comes up again. But with kids, they're developmentally changing every few years, maybe even every few months. I mean, you know, it just depends on the child. So when a child is 6, they're going to experience their grief differently than when they're 8, or whenever they're 13, or whenever they're 16. And the other thing that's important to note is that children not only are grieving that current loss in the present, but they're also grieving all of the things that they're not going to have in the future. So, you know, it might be your mom won't be at your wedding day, or when you graduate high school. You know, you're grieving the present and what you've lost, but you're also grieving all of those things that they're not going to have. So that's a whole other layer to it as well. And what we can do is just provide information that's simple, honest, and concrete. You know, they may not want to talk about the death. You may ask them, you may probe them about it, and they may just not want to talk about it. And that's okay. Just being present and being available to them is important. Let go of all of your expectations about how you think a child should be grieving. And that's something that we should do in general with grief. We should let go of our expectations because we all grieve differently. Children may want to go out and play, or they may act as if nothing has happened. And that's okay. This is normal. That's okay if they do that. If they don't have an overly emotional reaction, that's okay. Ask for help from a professional, a therapist, your doctor. It's always good to check in with the doctor, always. You know, a program like our program, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, but, you know, reach out and ask for help.
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to catch up.
That's okay.
Reza nos está comentando qué hacer como adulto para ayudar al niño cuando está sufriendo una pérdida. Ella dice que ella crea un plan individualizado para el niño y que varía para cada niño, porque como puede ser para un niño, para el hermano puede ser diferente y para el otro hermano puede ser diferente. Y también para la familia en general. Reza dice que los niños actúan de una manera diferente, tienen un proceso diferente al de los adultos, porque los niños como que lo sufren una vez y otra vez y otra vez. No quiere decir que los padres no, pero los niños, como están en cambios por su etapa de desarrollo, entonces es diferente a los 8 años, que a los 13 años, que a los 15 años, entonces están constantemente en ese cambio de etapa de desarrollo que le agrega un poco más de complejidad. También nos comenta que el niño sufre una pérdida del presente y del futuro, porque no nada más es lo que ocurrió en este momento, pero también están pensando, no va a estar mi mamá o mi papá o mi hermano en mi graduación o en eventos importantes de su vida. Entonces, la manera de ayudar a los niños es decirles cosas simples y concretas, estar presentes y estar disponibles. Otra cosa que mencionó es dejar ir las expectativas, que vamos a encontrar niños que actúan como que no sucede nada, y así es su manera de demostrar la pérdida. También dice Reza que es importante siempre buscar sugerencias de doctores. So I was just sharing at the end that you mentioned that it's important also to consult a doctor. You mean a doctor like, what kind of doctor do you mean?
So it's always a good idea to just let your general practitioner doctor, your pediatrician, know that there's been a loss in the family. They might already know, especially if the person was sick or if there was something, but it's a great idea to just talk with them and let them know that there's been a life change. That way, if there is something that comes up, then they can refer to a more specialized doctor if needed.
Ok, entonces Reza dice que pues el pediatra del niño, para que el pediatra pueda hacer enviarlo a un especialista si es necesario. I guess the question came up to me, Reza, because in Mexico, for example, like some parents might not go to the primary doctor and might directly go to an specialist, because sometimes the medical system works differently, that you don't have to go to the primary doctor to get a referral. So as you were talking, I was, I remember that because I used to live in Mexico, and there is very often that you don't need the referral, but here in the US and in many other countries that is needed. So you go to the child's pediatrician, and then the child will address that.
Yeah, you could, if you were going directly to a doctor, you could, I think a lot of general practitioners could help with it, but I think, a psychiatrist or, a psychiatrist that specializes in children's, in children would be good too. So,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Un pediatra que se especialice en este tipo de situaciones de pérdidas.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gracias.
So just in continuing on about what you can do when a child is grieving, keep the routines as normal as possible. It provides them security. Let your child's teacher and school counselor know about the death, because they can provide additional support during the school day. And, I've partnered with, in my previous job, I partnered with a lot of schools, and that was something that the counselors and the social workers in the schools were very diligent about, was checking in with those children that have experienced loss and just giving them a little time. There was even sometimes that the school counselors would give them a little colorful notepad, and they would say, put this on your desk if you need to leave the room, and then the teacher will know. The teacher will understand why you need to leave, and then come on down to my office and we can talk. So it was kind of giving them an escape during the school day. I know right now life is a little different because of the virtual world, but as far as, just letting the school know that, hey, we might need some additional support, that's going to be really important.
Ok, Reza, voy a traducir esa parte. Reza nos dice que es importante mantener la rutina, que esto le da seguridad al niño, y que le dejen saber al maestro del niño y al consejero, al terapeuta de la escuela, lo que sucedió de la pérdida, porque así le pueden dar seguimiento y observar al niño, observar cómo progresa, qué sucede, cómo es su comportamiento, y que hay veces que hay maestros o maestros que le dan al niño un cuaderno con muchos colores, que sea llamativo, y le dicen que lo deje en su escritorio, si es que necesita dejar el salón. So, Reza, the reason for that colorful notepad to leave it in their desk if they need to leave their room, what is the purpose of that?
So it's basically just a way for the child to let the teacher know, I'm overwhelmed and I need to step out of the class, without having to say it, basically. So the teacher would obviously know that this is a system, and if they saw the notepad out on the desk, then they would know, okay, they need to step out because they're having a moment where they're struggling, or need to go talk to the counselor.
Yes. Entonces, esa idea de poner ese cuaderno con colores en el escritorio es para que si el niño necesita salir del salón y no quiere hablar, que sea una señal para que la maestra sepa que el niño tuvo que salir porque no se sentía bien o porque quiere ir a hablar con la consejera o el terapeuta de la escuela. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. It can be hard for kids to be able to express how they feel, and then also to have to say it in front of a whole classroom. That can be embarrassing. So it's just a good tool. But also just to be aware that grief can manifest itself behaviorally and physically. So just listen and respond in a non-judgmental way. Give them a creative outlet to express their feelings. You could do drawing, writing, arts and crafts, listening to music, playing games. There's so many ideas, and work with your child, work with the child to ask them what is soothing to you, what helps you the most. Let's come up with a plan for some ideas that could help. And know that they may need to express anger about the death. So work together on how to express that anger safely. Talking about not doing it in a safe way to not harm yourself or others or any property, but let's get it out of there though. Let's express it. There's so many different ways too. So, this isn't a concrete list. This isn't an exhaustive list. This isn't a list that can go on and just depending on the child. But with your help, they should be able to move through the healing process feeling understood and supported. And that's the goal. We want them to feel understood and supported. And at least to know that, hey, someone is here for you in every way if we can.
Reza, you mentioned something important that caught my attention. And I guess I will ask a question and then I will translate that portion. You mentioned to ask the child, because you know what I noticed? I used to be a teacher, like I told you before, and sometimes we forget to ask them, because we think we know. We think we know the answer for them. And sometimes it just takes that time to ask them, what will help you to release what you are feeling? Many times they know the answer, or maybe there is a way to find out how they can tell you what can help them, because that will help better if it's coming from them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've had multiple, children tell me, no, I don't think that'll help me, but this will. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Let's come up with an idea together where it'll be effective for you, So yeah, that's so important to include them in the conversation. I think as adults, we tend to minimize children's feelings at times, and we tend to put our feelings onto them. But if we can really include them in that conversation of how they're feeling and what's helpful for them, that's just going to benefit all of us.
Yes, that's very important. And you said that there were two ways that they manifest how they feel. One is behavior and the other one
Physical.
Physical. Behavior and physical.
Yeah, I think that physical symptoms of grief are sometimes the most important piece of talking about grief, because we don't realize that stomach aches, headaches, exhaustion, fatigue, the inability to concentrate, those are all manifestations of grief, physically. And we don't put that two and two together sometimes about that.
Yes. I'm going to translate what you said before. Reza dice que hay dos maneras de manifestar cómo se siente el niño con una pérdida, y es con comportamiento y físicamente. Y dice cómo es importante nosotros como adultos ayudarles para darles una salida a esos sentimientos que tienen de pérdida, ya sea con música, con juegos, con pintar, con hacer ejercicio. Hay muchas actividades que se pueden sugerir para que el niño saque esos sentimientos. Y lo que dice Reza que es importante es preguntarle al niño, ¿qué crees tú que te podría ayudar a sentirte mejor? Muchas veces los niños nos pueden dar esa información y junto con ellos podemos tener una idea de cómo podemos ayudarlos a que se sientan mejor. También dice Reza que el anger, el enojo es muy común y que es importante trabajar con ellos de cómo sacar ese enojo de manera segura, de que no se lastime el niño o que no lastime a los demás. Eso es muy importante. Anger is so important to release, it's so important. I was just saying enojo. And yes, she's just saying that it's important es importante que los niños se sientan apoyados y comprendidos. Es muy, muy importante. Y que algunas de las manifestaciones que el niño tiene físicamente cuando tienen una pérdida es falta de concentración, falta de apetito, dolor de estómago, dolor de cabeza. Okay.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think, these are just basic things that can help children and it can be a little bit different when they're older. I wanted to just point that out with the teens. Similar, but just, it goes back to what I was saying earlier with just creating that individualized depending on your child. With the teens, it's very similar. But asking them like, what's the most helpful for you right now is always a really good thing to do. Helping them, letting them know that there's no pressure on you about this. We're here, I'm here for you. We're going to get you help. And teens also need that creative outlet too. So, and it may be focused on more physical activity for teens, but really allowing them to have that creative expression as well. So many teens in my groups love to be able to do the art projects and be able to get out their feelings on paper. That's really helpful too.
Okay, Reza, nada más voy a mencionar eso y voy a leer. I'm gonna look at a comment that somebody made.
Okay.
But I'm gonna translate that portion. Reza dice que para los adolescentes también se crea un plan individual y que es importante decirles que no necesitan presionarse, que no hay presión. Aquí estamos contigo para ayudarte. Y dice que es importante crear un plan, to create a creative plan, un plan creativo. En este caso, para sacar los sentimientos que tienen. Y en este caso, más que creativo, para los adolescentes muchas veces es físico. So for the teens, most of the time, the outlet is physical because of their developmental stage. That's why you said that are suffering. Somebody in the audience, Reza said, Jeff is saying, put them with other children that are suffering grief.
Absolutely.
So he's talking about like a support.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great segue into what Stepping Stones does. If that's okay, Lily, I can talk a little bit about that now.
Yes.
Okay, so Stepping Stones is a program that Yellow Hospice has had for quite a long time. It typically, previously, pre-COVID, it was an in-person support group for children, and they were grouped together based on their ages. So they would physically come into the office, be grouped with other children that were their ages and that had experienced similar loss, and would just have a support group. It would run from August to May, or September to May, so through the whole school year. And they would come every week. And it was a really healing time for those kids. The curriculum was based off of the Dougie Center, which is an organization I believe it's in Colorado, but the Dougie Center, they help to create curriculum and grief programs for use all over, but they also have a center there that kids come and experience grief together. So that's typically what Stepping Stones was doing before. Post-COVID, it's been a little crazy, as everybody knows. We now have revamped our Stepping Stones program to a virtual support group for children ages 4 to 17. So I combined programs from the Dougie Center model that we were using previously with other successful programs like Judy's House, which is another organization, and then the National Alliance for Grieving Children. Kind of combined a little bit of everything to make a new curriculum that is best for our kids. So what we do is an 8-week virtual session. It's all on Zoom. I actually in the middle of one right now. Next week will be week 3. We meet every week for about 45 minutes. I have 3 groups, and I did start out doing it based on age, where I would group together all the kids based on their like age, but I've kind of went away from that, and I will do like an individual orientation with the child to see what their developmental level is and talk with them a little bit about their experience, and then I group them with other kids that are in a similar developmental stage and also experience with loss. So they're grouped together pretty well based on what they're going through. So like you said, Jeff, that's awesome, and I totally agree with that. Getting them with other people that understand exactly what they're going through, maybe not exactly but similar, is one of the best things you can do. But each week we have a weekly topic, and we go over that each week for 8 weeks.
Weekly topic. Ok, Reza nos dice que una persona en la audiencia se llama Jeff, dice que es bueno poner a los niños en grupos. Entonces Reza está ampliando y diciendo que sí, que ella ahorita tiene grupos virtuales en Zoom, donde se unen la edad es de 4 a 17 años y se unen niños en ese grupo. Es por 8 semanas y dura 45 minutos. Y es una manera muy buena de que los niños puedan compartir cosas en grupo. Y cada semana es un tópico diferente. You know, Reza, I noticed we have about 12 minutes, so we still have a little bit of time. So yeah, just, continue.
I was also going to share with you a little bit of stepping stones. Not only do we provide the support groups for the kids, but we also provide individual counseling too. So everything is on Zoom right now, but I can meet with children individually and talk with them one-on-one. They can do both. They can do individual and the group, or they can do either one. In some instances, I've had it where we'll meet individually, then they'll join the group, and then they'll continue with individual sessions afterwards. But yeah, I'm just really trying to, like I said, individualize it based on what our children are needing in the area. And not only are we doing that, but we also provide support to parents and guardians. So even if that's just an email that's, hey, this happened, I'm a little overwhelmed, do you have any advice? We can kind of help them through that experience too. YOLO Hospice provides free bereavement counseling in our 5-county area that we cover for adults too. So we can also provide that to the parents and the guardians if they're struggling with their grief as well, but also just providing them tips and education on what it's like for your child grieving right now too, and how to help that too. When we were in person, we were doing a parent group as well, but now we are just doing everything via phone and email, and hopefully going to start up a program for parents of a grieving child too. That's the future hope.
Yes, and I want to tell our audience that I'm going to type into the comments later all the information that you have provided.
Okay.
YOLO Hospice, and then your information, and then you did mention some organizations before.
Mm-hmm.
In our previous what you were sharing earlier. I would like to share those too.
Yeah, I can give you the links for sure.
Yes, please. I just want to let the audience know that information is going to be posted in the comments later.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say briefly that in Spanish, que YOLO Hospice provee terapia individual. Reza hace terapia individual para padres o para personas que cuidan niños que a veces no son necesariamente los padres. Se les dice guardians. Y también ofrecen gratis para adultos el programa el que se llama Bereavement Program. Es gratuito para los adultos. Y también tienen un grupo para padres. Y ya que se empiecen las actividades en persona, van a empezar a tener esos grupos con padres en persona. So yeah, hopefully you will be starting doing sessions in person, sometime soon this year.
Yeah, I really hope so. And, I was watching a webinar yesterday, and it was an organization in Georgia that was presenting it, and they actually talked about how they're going to keep, once in-person groups resume, they're going to keep the virtual aspect as well. Mm-hmm. So that was just something to think about, is that we can do so much online, and we can reach so many more people. Sometimes it's easier for people to be able to do it online because it's harder to get into the physical office. So that might be something, in the future, but I think that's really, really cool to see other organizations in the United States and all over that are working with families and children. And during this time, it's a very complicated way of life. So we're hoping that we do get back to in person, but that online aspect is always still there. So
yes, it's really good to keep those those virtual gatherings, because many parents are not able to join in person. They are with their activities, with their schedule. It just gets, and more when you have lost somebody in your life, there is so much going on in your life that
it can be very overwhelming, that's for sure. So that's our goal, is to help provide support through that process, and in whatever way we can.
Yes. There is so much to share, Reza. I feel like, wow, and I am really enjoying the conversation. We have still 5 minutes, and if there is anything else that you would like to share.
Oh gosh, I don't really have. YOLO Hospice does have a Facebook presence. We have a Facebook page, and we have a website. And if anyone has any questions or ever just wants to talk about children's grief, or any kind of grief and you need guidance, like, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for that. So, and I always enjoy having conversations with people and being able to help spread that awareness about childhood grief. It's, I think before I started really working with children exclusively, I never realized how many children were going through so many I never realized how many children were experiencing death in their family, whether it's a parent, a guardian, a sibling, a grandparent, someone close, a close friend. I mean, there's so many experiences out there. So I'm just happy to be able to share that knowledge, and then, hopefully awareness for childhood grief any way that I can.
Yes, and like I was telling you earlier, that I'm sure hospice workers are very busy, at this time of so many losses and so many layers and so complicated things, new things dealing, right? It's a new situation, so it's in many ways it's new experiences.
Yes, right? Grief I think we'll see complicated grief due to COVID for a long time after. So many people's grief experience is so totally different right now. We're not able to have those rituals, those memorials, those funerals in the same way that we would have, previously. So, and then just gathering and being with family, there's so much isolation in grief. And then COVID is making even isolation even more intense, if that can even be a thing, because we are so isolated in our grief. But COVID is definitely causing the havoc for sure on that process.
Yes, Reza está diciendo que en estos tiempos de COVID es el trabajo para hospice, es mucho, es muy intenso, porque hay experiencias nuevas, porque estás agregando el factor de que estamos encerrados encima de todo lo que se siente en una pérdida, es agregar el factor de que nos sentimos aislados. Entonces es más complicado. El proceso de pérdida es todavía más intenso. So it's more intense in many ways.
Yeah, it is. So I definitely want to honor everybody's grief, and just, hopefully, we can provide a sense of support for not only children, but for everybody, because we don't want anyone to feel like they're ever alone,
Yes, wow. Wow. I would like to keep hearing your conversation, but like I said, I'm going to invite you again sometime.
Thank you.
Later, and maybe I will see if we can have more than an hour conversation, because there is a lot to talk.
Oh yeah, we could talk all day about it.
Yes.
But I appreciate you having me on, and everybody listening. I appreciate you chiming in and talking and listening. It's been very nice. Thank you.
Sí, I want to say thank you, to the audience who joined live. and who shared what we talked today, because this is so important. And quiero darle las gracias a Reza y a todas las personas que se unieron en vivo, que hicieron preguntas y comentarios y que compartieron. Reza volverá a venir al programa más adelante y compartirá más cosas acerca de pérdida y de cómo ayudar a los niños y a los adolescentes y a las familias con una pérdida de un ser querido. Thank you, Reza, again. And I hope everybody has a blessed and beautiful day. And we will see you again next week in AngelSpeakers, interpretado en español, a las 3 de la tarde, hora del este, 12 hora del Pacífico. See you next week on Friday, AngelSpeakers interpreted in Spanish at 3 p.m. Eastern and 12 p.m. Pacific. Gracias a todos.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.